The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Business Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericabusiness.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to GlobeTalk with Avasant. Avasant is a next-generation global consulting firm that has its finger on the pulse of the global economy. Join us for an exciting look at the world economy. Now, here is your host, Kevin Parikh.
Good afternoon. Welcome to GlobeTalk with Avasant. My name is Ravi Mahalingam. I'm Avasant's General Counsel, and I'll be hosting this afternoon's broadcast in place of Kevin, who is out sick this week. Today we're going to talk about the phenomenon of cloud computing, which is all the rage in the world of technology services. Our first guest is David Mihalchik, who is the Business Development Executive for Google's federal practice. David has engineered Google's certification for cloud computing services for the federal government. Thank you for joining us, David.
Thank you.
Most people associate Google with its internet search engine and don't really identify it as an IT company as of yet. However, Google has had a very successful business line of email, calendar, voice, and document management applications, which more and more companies are adopting. How would you characterize the relative success of Google's foray into IT?
I would characterize it as very successful. We have more than 3 million businesses now running Google Apps with more than 30 million active users. And as an internet company, our computing infrastructure is our competitive advantage, and we're well placed to succeed in the cloud. The enterprise business itself was built on the realization that users want the same technology at work that they have at home. When they're at home, they have anytime, anywhere access to their email. They don't worry about running out of space in their email inbox. And for many users, that's not the same experience at work, and that enterprise technology in some ways has fallen behind. So enterprise is a top priority at Google from the executive team on down. It's considered a core business for us, and we now have more than 1,000 employees working on Google Enterprise. So
within the world of Google, is Google Enterprise viewed as a separate division, as like an IT services company that's distinct from the search engine and the advertising services that run that side of the business? It's a totally different revenue stream?
We are a division within Google.
And of the 3 million business customers you mentioned, do you have an idea of what the percentage breakdown is between, say, larger enterprises of more than 100 employees and smaller enterprises under that number?
It spans across the board. We have users adopting at a rapid pace in the small and mid-market, and we have large enterprises as well. In the government space, we have government customers in more than 30 states and federal government agencies as well.
That's very interesting. Another big development for Google's IT business has been its development of cloud computing services. Can you tell our audience what Google defines as cloud computing and why Google has chosen to aggressively develop a service offering in this area?
Absolutely. Cloud computing refers to internet-based computing, where software and information in data centers is sent over the internet to computers, cell phones, other devices. The technology enables people to quickly turn on applications and innovation like a utility instead of having to install and run their own applications. So data can be accessed anytime, anywhere, from any internet-connected device. I would say bottom line here is that we're in the early days of a major technological change, and we're seeing people spending more time working in the cloud, collaborating in the cloud, and we expect that trend to continue and accelerate.
And I can say from our part at Avasant, we see very similar trends with our client base. Google has made a big splash in the world of IT recently with the announcement that it is the first company to secure Federal Information Security Management Act, or FISMA, certification to provide cloud computing services to federal agencies. Can you tell our audience who may not be that familiar with the act, what is FISMA and what does this particular certification do for Google's overall standing as an IT company?
Absolutely. FISMA is a requirement that all federal government agencies must meet by law. So all information technology systems must be evaluated under the FISMA security framework. It's a statutory requirement. And you're right, as you mentioned, in July we announced that Google Apps is the first cloud computing suite to receive a FISMA security authorization from the U.S. government, and in particular the U.S. General Services Administration. Obtaining the certification for Google Apps is critical to government customers. They cannot run technology that is not FISMA certified. That's, again, a requirement from Congress. What it represents is really a green light from the U.S. government that agencies can move forward to the cloud, and Google's cloud in particular, with confidence. It was a top-to-bottom review process that took almost a year, and we were evaluated on about 200 specific controls that are defined as part of FISMA, and we submitted about 1,500 pages to the General Services Administration that were reviewed and evaluated by both the GSA and an independent auditor.
So on the specific issue of the process to get certification, when you talk about 200 specific controls that you were required to comply with, are these controls, were they revealed to you after signing an NDA of some kind, or are they available to anyone who would like to provide services to the government?
The latter. They're available as part of a set of NIST controls that are available and that the FISMA law refers to and is based on. So these controls are publicly available, and again, they're the same controls that existing government agency systems must meet.
Right. Most people don't think of the federal government as an innovator in the technology space. At what point did Google realize that the federal government would be an ideal customer for your cutting-edge services, such as cloud computing?
Well, I would say government customers have been interested in Google Apps since we first introduced the product back in 2007. And we've been listening closely to federal agencies and working to understand their unique requirements. What we're hearing is that agencies are spending too much for outdated technology. And that they're looking for a less costly, more powerful technology or solution, and that's what Google Apps is offering. I think your question reminds me of a statement that was made by the outgoing OMB director, Peter Orszag, in talking about some of the challenges that the government is facing with IT right now, and in cloud computing specifically. He said that government has an opportunity to have what he called a late mover advantage, and normally that's not, being a late mover is not an advantage, but what he's referring to is the fact that government, which has some older and more outdated systems today, has the opportunity to move to the cloud and solutions like Google Apps that bring them up to date almost immediately and give them the power of the very latest technology and Google's innovation and the best that we have to offer instantly. So it brings them back from maybe technology that in some cases is 10 or 15 years behind, and brings them immediately up to date with the very latest that is available.
Peter Orzag's observation is very insightful. It's reminiscent of how a number of developing countries have advanced technologically by bypassing the industrial age and going straight to the virtual or wireless age.
Exactly.
The people who are familiar with the IT industry found it somewhat surprising that Google was the first to meet the FISMA requirements. I think you got into this a little bit in your earlier answer to this question, but how difficult was it for Google to comply with FISMA? Did it require a concerted effort to re-engineer the security requirements for your premier applications offerings, or was it the case that Google's standards were already compliant and you mainly needed to tweak it to address certain particular FISMA standards?
We made no engineering changes to Google Apps in order to meet FISMA requirements. We did have to create required documentation, but security is a top priority for Google. And this was a top-to-bottom review of our security for Google Apps. And as I said, we examined, as part of the requirements, a set of 200 controls. And it was about 1,500 pages in documentation that we submitted to the government. So an extremely thorough review. And in fact, the agencies that have reviewed our package have said almost uniformly that the security of Google Apps is either as secure or more secure than the way that agencies are running their existing systems today for email and for collaboration. One other point that I would mention here is you mentioned some have found it surprising. I do think there is some confusion in the marketplace. There have been many labels placed on cloud computing, and as I said, I think that's created some confusion about the definition. But whether it's a public cloud or a private cloud or a community cloud, we really see these labels falling away because they're proxies for judging security, and more moving forward, government agencies will look at a cloud offering and see it's either FISMA certified or it's not FISMA certified, and it's either passed this top-to-bottom security review or it hasn't.
I see. So, based on that, why do you think Google won the race to be the first to receive federal government approval? Do you think that maybe Google's applications and their interface and the engineering that supports it was just maybe better suited for what the government needed? Was it just more developed because of the constant innovation that goes on within your company, or was it some other reason?
I think really it speaks to our commitment to meet the government security requirements, and it's another example of our leadership in the cloud. Google is a cloud computing company. We have more than 10 years of experience of providing cloud computing solutions, and security is a top priority for us. We have some of the top security experts in the world that work here. So we think it's very important. Federal employees stand to benefit here from better collaboration, from higher productivity as a result of using Google Apps and more advanced technologies like Google Apps. So the FISMA certification is the key to getting this technology in the hands of federal employees and other government users.
So in essence, since Google started off as somewhat of a virtual company providing cloud-type services, and initially it was well-positioned to adapt itself to FISMA.
Right, and security and security is something that was not something that was bolted on to our system. It was baked in from the beginning as part of the cloud computing system that we developed. So I think that's an important factor as well.
That's great. I think we're going to be heading to a commercial break now, but we'll be back with David Mihalchik of Google.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
Avasant, your management consulting firm for the next generation, providing sourcing advisory, globalization, and go-to-market strategies. In an unpredictable world, Avasant is your trusted global advisor. Learn more about us. go to www.avasant.com. That's AVASANT.com.
Source, providing global sourcing solutions for IT and business process services. We offer call center sales and support services at the highest industry standards. Cape Source, world-class IT services straight from the heart of Africa. Learn more about us on the web at www.capesource.org.
Tune in to It's Your Money with host Bill Pfeifferlich. You'll get an eye-opening education about some of the misconceptions of the financial world. If you are a business owner, working professional, or successful American, you will benefit from the information on our program. Our guests will include financial service professionals, international tax and estate attorneys, and CPAs. We'll identify solutions that you can implement now to get the most of your money. Tune in Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time for It's Your Money on Voice America Business.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to GlobeTalk with Avasant. We're here to answer your questions about the global economy. Please send an email to globetalk@avasant.com. That's globetalk@avasant, AVASANT.com. Now, back to our program. Here's Kevin Parikh.
Welcome back to GlobeTalk with Avasant. My name is Ravi Mahalingam. I'm Avasant's General Counsel, and I'm standing in for Kevin Parikh, who is out sick today. We are going to continue our discussion now with David Mihalchik of Google, and we are mainly focused on the subject of Google's foray into cloud computing. So, David, as we've been discussing in the first part of this interview, cloud has a very broad meaning in the IT industry. If you do a search on the Internet, it can be all things to all people, depending on what article you pull up. So as far as the federal government is concerned, what specific applications or capabilities is Google implementing to support the federal government?
So our Google Apps technology, which is a software-as-a-service platform, provides email, instant messaging, calendar, word processing, and a site capability, site creation capability for collaboration, and also video sharing capability. And so really this is focused on messaging and collaboration. And the cloud offers opportunity for enhanced collaboration is what we see. So the ability, for example, not only to do word processing, but to actually work in the same document at the same time with a group of 5 people or 10 people and in remote locations, so that co-editing can not be limited just to people in the same room or limited to having to write a document yourself and then email it to someone else, but actually real-time collaboration in a document. And again, this is all driven by the fact that we see that these enterprise users, whether they be federal employees or whether they be in the private sector, they're looking for the same technology capabilities at work that they have at home. It used to be at work you had the best technology, but now more and more we're seeing that employees have the best technology at home. They have a bigger inbox. They have a better capability to collaborate. Sometimes they have a faster internet connection at home. And it's easier for users to access their consumer accounts than it is often for them to access their accounts at work. So in the case of the federal government is spending nearly $80 billion a year on information technology. They are the single largest spender on information technology in the world. And yet the government is not regarded as a leader in information technology. So I think there's a general recognition that government is spending too much and that it's not getting the most out of every dollar that it spends on IT. So the return on investment needs to be increased, and I think it's natural that the government is looking at cloud computing because it offers an opportunity to provide less costly technology that is still more powerful. And all of the tools that I mentioned, real-time collaboration, video chat, the anywhere, anytime access, the better uptime and reliability. This is very important for telework initiatives in the federal government, for managing potential disasters or disaster recovery situations, where workers are forced to work remotely and unexpectedly. And again, this is all happening at a lower cost than what the government is using its IT spend for today.
So you've mentioned a couple of things I thought were interesting. One is the issue of cost containment and getting more value for dollars spent. This is something that we see a lot among private sector companies. What do you think is the imperative within the government to have what seems to be a very similar attitude, trying to get more value for the dollar in terms of IT spend?
Well, I think the imperative is meeting the obligation that government agencies have to the taxpayer, and making sure that government agencies can best meet their mission, that they have the best tools to meet their mission.
So in terms of the incentives, instead of the bottom line profit, it's really about responsibility to the taxpayer and to achieve the stated objective of each particular government agency.
Correct.
And have you found that, in your experience, to be a motivator on an equal level with that of the typical for-profit motive of a private sector company?
I think that agencies are always looking for the best value and the best technology that is available to them. And I think that a number of federal government agencies see email and collaboration as a very, very important tool that's available to employees. Communication and collaboration is extremely important to just about any agency's mission. So I think that agencies are taking a close look at this technology, and they're looking at how they can get a better return on investment and how they can get the best value for the taxpayer dollar.
And when you talk about real-time collaboration services or functionality, is that something that's available to standard consumers of Google Apps today, or is this something that is really meant for the enterprise or business level customer? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, in what ways are the services that are being rolled out to the government different from what is rolled out to, say, a small business user or an individual user?
Many of these capabilities are available to consumers. The difference for the enterprise is that for example, more storage is available to enterprise users. Association with the enterprise domain is available for our enterprise users. Access to a set of APIs that are developed specifically for enterprise users. User support is made available as part of the contract. And things like, in the case of the government, the FISMA certification is made available as well. So we definitely we have a consumer product, and we've tailored the product for enterprises as well.
And what specific agencies of the federal government is Google targeting? Do you envision that that all government agencies will become supported by Google, or do you have to? Are there some agencies which are better suited for your services than others?
Well, we talk with federal government agencies across the board, in civilian and DoD and intelligence. And in fact, when it comes to our enterprise technology portfolio, which includes Google Search and our geospatial technologies, Google Maps and Google Earth for the enterprise, we have every executive level cabinet agency in the government is using one or more of these enterprise technologies. Specifically for Google Apps, Berkeley National Labs, part of the U.S. Department of Energy, has deployed Google Apps for over 4,000 employees and an additional 1,000 research partners. There, they expect to save about $1.5 to $2 million over the next 5 years from that technology change and that investment. The U.S. Navy's InRelief.org division is using the suite to collaborate with NGOs and foreign governments. That's for disaster relief scenarios. That's a particular use case where the collaboration capabilities are very important.
And as we know, as most Americans know, the healthcare law was passed earlier this year, the Affordable Care Act, and that is obviously going to have a great impact on the world of IT. What do you think that the Department of Health and Human Services would need from a cloud services basis in order to support and implement the changes that are in the healthcare legislation?
I think that the Health and Human Services, like any federal agency, needs a set of reliable tools that are easy for workers to use, that have anytime, anywhere access, that have a great deal of email storage so that employees are not spending time worrying about is their email box full and do they have to take messages out and move them somewhere else, so that they can just maintain regular communication throughout the day with the information that they need to be getting through email. I think they want to empower the workforce to be able to collaborate from remote locations in order to increase productivity. And I think they're like any agency, going to be very concerned about security and meeting the requirements of FISMA and making sure that they have the most up-to-date technology in terms of the pace of innovation that is available to them, that they're not having to spend time and resource managing security patches that come out every couple of Tuesdays and worrying about exploits from hackers from known vulnerabilities that are published on a regular schedule to their own system. And at the same time, know that they are not going to be worried about when the next upgrade needs to happen and when the next big investment in an upgrade needs to happen, because with cloud computing solutions like Google Apps, there is no version of Google Apps. There's just one version. We're constantly updating the technology to provide new capabilities. We've added, since the introduction of Google Apps, whole new capabilities. We added, for example, the Google Sites capability. We added the Google Video capability. Each year we're making hundreds of updates and improvements to the technology. So I think this is what HHS and other federal agencies are really closely examining.
Great. Microsoft seems to be one of Google's primary competitors in the race to be a provider of cloud computing services. And I'm told we only have about a minute left, but as Microsoft is working to obtain FISMA certification, do you anticipate tough competition for federal government projects from them? Do you think that competition will be a benefit to customers?
I think competition is welcomed, and I think almost all the innovation in the coming years that we're going to see is going to come in the cloud, and there. In the next generation, there's always room for more players, and some of whom we may not even know about today that are coming into the market.
Great. Well, it was wonderful to have you on the show. We thank you very much for taking time out of what must be a very busy schedule to inform our audience. Thanks very much, and we would love to invite you back for another interview sometime in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
From the boardroom to you, Voice America Business Network.
Go inside the world of PR with PR Insider, hosted by public relations expert Maureen Kettis. Maureen will speak to the world's highest profile PR pros from the fields of marketing, advertising, and sales. And PR Insider will feature renowned members of the media as special guests. Maureen will give you a VIP access pass, including tips and tricks to take your business to the next level. PR Insider with Maureen Kettis, sponsored by Cision, us.cision.com. Listen every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Business Network.
Cape CapeSource, providing global sourcing solutions for IT and business process services. We offer call center sales and support services at the highest industry standards. CapeSource, world-class IT services straight from the heart of Africa. Learn more about us on the web at www.capesource.org.
Are you looking for innovative ideas on how to achieve your financial dreams? Tune in to Empirical Investing Radio every Thursday afternoon at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern on the Voice America Business Channel. Join certified financial planners Ken Smith and Ethan Broga to learn how you can obtain financial success. You'll be entertained while you discover techniques to alleviate your financial concerns. Empirical Investing Radio every Thursday at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern on the Voice America Business Channel.
Avasant, your management consulting firm for the next generation, providing sourcing advisory, globalization, and go-to-market strategies. In an unpredictable world, Avasant is your trusted global advisor. Learn more about us. Go to www.avasant.com. That's AVASANT.com.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You are listening to GlobeTalk with Avasant. We're here to answer your questions about the global economy. Please send an email to globetalk@avasant.com. That's globetalk at Avasant, AVASANT.com. Now, back to our program. Here's Kevin Parikh.
Back and good afternoon again. My name is Ravi Mahalingam. I'm the General Counsel for Avasant, and I am hosting this week's episode of GlobeTalk with Avasant. Kevin Parikh will be back next week. We are going to continue on our discussion of cloud computing. We are going to speak now with Professor Vijay Gurbaxani, who is a professor of information systems at the Mirage School of Business at the University of California, Irvine. Professor, welcome.
Thank you, Ravi. Good to be here.
And I'm certain I left a few other accolades that I need to use to describe you. Would you like to inform our audience more about what you do at UCI?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm a professor of information systems at the Mirage School of Business, and I focus on the economics of information technology, really from a strategic perspective. I also direct a research center called the Center for Research on IT and Organizations, which brings together a bunch of researchers who've focused on a variety of aspects of information technology, really focused on the social, economic, and managerial impacts of the technology.
Great, and welcome to our program. So, in our first half-hour segment, we were talking specifically with Google and their foray into IT. And I think in this segment, we want to really break down what cloud computing is. So outsourcing, broadly defined, came in waves based on technological developments that substantially reduced the cost and efficacy of manufacturing products or delivering services from remote, including offshore locations. It appears that cloud computing is the next step in the development of that type of services model. What do you think will be the next set of services that will be restructured as a cloud-based solution?
So to answer that question, I think it would be helpful to kind of just look at the underlying economics of technology. And I think what we discover is kind of technology has a high fixed cost of development. So whether you look at kind of the old mainframe systems and in particular software systems, high fixed cost of development, but run as many times as you want for virtually no additional cost. And I think that's the core driver of most of the solutions that we're talking about today. So in the old days, we kind of ran shared mainframe systems, and people have forgotten about terms like facilities management and so on, but we had the old time-sharing machines. And that was because, and people actually went to the computer center to work with the computer because the costs of communication were very high. And now what we've got is zero marginal cost communications, and so the ability to distribute applications and as a service have become far easier than they ever were. So that kind of, I think, is what is driving most of these. If you look, so it used to be about hardware sharing, then some about software sharing. But if you look across the whole, the range of companies, you have to ask yourself the question as to why companies need the IT infrastructures that they have when there are better alternatives available or cheaper alternatives available, as the case might be. And there's a lot of commonality in what companies do. Clearly, if you're focusing on strategic applications, there's things that you want to distinguish yourself from your competitors with. But for the most part, if you're looking at kind of base level applications like accounts payable, accounts receivable, and yes, there may be a few differences between companies, but they're really not that different across a lot of different companies. So I think having established the economics, there's a lot of applications that I think, a lot of services that can move to the cloud. If you think about kind of the business process outsourcing space, which is, in my view, kind of an early incarnation of cloud-based computing, though nobody was even talking about it that way back then. It's virtually any common business process that I think can move to a cloud-based service. And by process, I also include things like kind of standard applications like email, like your guest from Google was talking about. In fact, the University of Minnesota has switched to Gmail altogether as their mail service, as their mail application. So there's a lot of, I think, any number of business processes and IT applications that can be served from the cloud.
Great, thank you, Vijay. So to get into the different types of services that are often associated with cloud computing, one is software as a service. Sometimes that term is used interchangeably with cloud computing, though on closer inspection, SaaS seems to be a subset of cloud service offerings. Can you tell our audience what SaaS is and what are some prominent examples of such companies, and what is the business case for moving to such a model?
Sure. So first, I think the three broad categories that often get used or bandied around together kind of in anything that's in the cloud is software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service. And it's really a question of what are the things that you're bundling together that you offer to a client. So, for example, if you look at Amazon, they're offering, for the most part, kind of what I would call infrastructure as a service. So these are hardware-based offerings that they offer to a variety of different customers. If you look at software as a service, that is pretty much what the term actually describes. It is, an application as a service. So the best example of that is probably Salesforce, though certainly the Google Apps and similar categories, fall into that category as well. And then you've got kind of platform as a service, which is it's basically a bundle of hardware and software that is offered. So I would say Google, Microsoft, Salesforce.com are all kind of the lead players in this whole software as a service sector within cloud-based computing or cloud computing.
And in terms of the business case, is it the case that for customers, if they move to a software as a service model, that they no longer have to make upfront investments in servers or software? And what's the advantage from the service provider side? How do they make money on this type of service?
So let's answer that question in two parts. So if you take the purchaser, the client's perspective, the economics become rather compelling, and I'm going to leave out political and organizational considerations. Let's hold that on the side for a minute, and we'll return to that. If you have a common business process, whatever you can think of, whatever business process you want to consider, let's say payroll, that is something where an application that is supported on the cloud kind of spares you all the kind of difficulties of putting together a hardware and software infrastructure that delivers the application. So you really kind of do not have to make the upfront investments in capital. So I think in hardware and software to deliver those services. So that's a huge advantage from the point of view of the purchasing company. But now if you break that down further into kind of who the purchaser is, there are companies that are smaller who have a hard time kind of coming up with the capital. For them, this to me is a no-brainer. the larger companies, I think the issue they run into oftentimes is that they already have the infrastructure in place. So, they've been engaging in that particular business process, since we're using the example of payroll. Let's just stay with payroll for a long, long time. And so now they have some switching costs associated with, do we need to move to an alternative vendor and deal with all the, the procurement issues that typically big company decisions. So that's one set of issues. Then kind of security is another set of issues. So CIOs that I talk to like to distinguish between the private cloud and the public cloud, and they often will argue that they have sufficient economies of scale. This is fundamentally an economies of scale business. That they don't necessarily need to migrate in a hurry. So I think you're seeing a transition, but it's slower than I think some people are expecting, largely because these processes work quite well for companies, and they may not have the bandwidth to deal with kind of these migration issues. But in the long term, I see this as an obvious trend, because there's always kind of changes to these systems, continuing innovation, and a company dedicated to that particular service is more likely to invest and innovate in improving that service.
I wanted to focus a little more on one part of your answer where you were talking about the larger enterprises who already have existing infrastructure that's built in effectively. And you described their transition to a fully cloud-based system as somewhat gradual. In what kind of time frame do you think that larger enterprises will do what smaller enterprises find much easier to do, which is to start immediately in the cloud?
So I actually asked that question to a group of CIOs, and it was very interesting because they all kind of had their toes in their water, and I literally mean their toes because, they were not, I wouldn't even say their ankles were in the water yet. But when you ask the question differently, which is in 10 years, where do you expect to be? Many of them will say a lot of their functionality will be delivered from the cloud. So it's kind of an interesting paradox, which is how do you get to fully delivered services from the cloud when you're really kind of not investing? And I think but these things kind of have that kind of, most kind of technological innovations have, very slow adoption in the early phases, and then they go through with diffusion folks like to call a period of contagion, and the steady state looks quite different from what we see now. So I think you're always going to see kind of innovators play with this. And then kind of I think over time this is going to catch on as people realize that the issues that exist today will be addressed. And one of the things the technology industry is particularly good at is addressing the obstacles or the issues that users have or companies have with migrating to kind of new technology solutions. And there's enough big players behind cloud-based initiatives that I think we're going to see adoption. But I would say over a period of 10 years, we're going to see very, very substantial adoption of cloud-based solutions. And I think, by the way, this is a very significant paradigm shift in the way computing services are delivered. I mean, we're really seeing kind of the early stages in a massive shift in how, what companies will look like 10 years from now. You're not going to see the massive infrastructures, IT infrastructures that they have, and a lot of the services that they deliver to their consumers and their end customers will be from the cloud.
In other words, the business case is there, but some companies are taking their time moving towards it.
It's like when you buy a new car, right? It's like your car's working.
Now, and we'll pick up this discussion after the break. You're listening to GlobeTalk with Avasant.
The business community's first choice in Internet Talk Radio. Voice America Business Network.
Avasant, your management consulting firm for the next generation, providing sourcing advisory, globalization, and go-to-market strategies. In an unpredictable world, Avasant is your trusted global advisor. Learn more about us. Go to www.avasant.com. That's AVASANT.com.
Are you thinking about starting a nonprofit? Or perhaps you've already started one and want ideas, inspiration, and encouragement? Tune in to Nonprofit Spark with your host, Renee McGivern. Our program will feature as guests the leaders of emerging nonprofits who will share what works for them. We also will hear from experts who offer advice to make your jobs easier. Tune in to Nonprofit Spark, and together we'll create a world that works for everyone. Nonprofit Spark airs live Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the Voice America Business Channel.
Cape Source, providing global sourcing solutions for IT and business process services. We offer call center sales and support services at the highest industry standards. Cape Source, world-class IT services straight from the heart of Africa. Learn more about us on the web at www.capesource.org.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to GlobeTalk with Avasant. We're here to answer your questions about the global economy. Please send an email to globetalk@avasant.com. That's globetalk@avasant, AVASANT.com. Now, back to our program. Here's Kevin Parikh.
Welcome back to Globe Talk with Avasant. My name is Ravi Mahalingam. I am the co-host of the show for today. Kevin Parikh is out sick. We're talking with Professor Vijay Gurbaxani of the University of California at Irvine, and we wanted to resume our discussion on cloud computing. In particular, we wanted to take a closer focus on this issue of what is the business case for service providers to move into the cloud. How do they make their money? Vijay, can you speak to this issue? What is the business case for service providers who provide cloud services today?
So I think that there's two aspects to the business case. On the one side, so if you think about it from a software provider, first there's a very large fixed cost of software development that every provider has to undergo. So they build a piece of software, think ERP, think customer relationship management, and then they have to keep spending money to innovate on the application as well, because that's just the way the technology world is. That's the way business conditions keep changing, technology keeps improving, and so on. So there's kind of a large upfront investment and then some ongoing investment that they have to make over time. Now, clearly, if they want to be a profitable company, they have to recoup this investment and make kind of a nice margin doing it. I think the opportunity that they saw was the distribution model for software was increasingly becoming kind of outdated simply because the Internet has made communications available at, for the most part, zero marginal cost. So what this allowed them to do is to deliver the software over a network rather than occupying lots of space on your PC. So a simple way to think about it is most of us, for example, have a thesaurus or a dictionary sitting on an application, on a word processing application that's on your desktop and occupying a lot of space. And so they began to think about this and said, well, why these things don't get used that frequently? Why can't we push a lot of this stuff on the cloud? And if you just pay attention to the way, we've used our applications over time, it used to be the software applications were upgraded. Somebody walked around your office building with the disk or, and upgraded it. Then it was over the network. And now you probably find you come back to your computer in the morning and, software has been updated. And sometimes it tells you that. Other times you have to reboot your computer and so on. So we've been delivering software over the Internet for a long, long time. And even though you don't consume a particular application as a service today, the upgrades are being delivered to you as a service. It's easy to think through kind of what happens when you've got a big application, the example I was using before was something that sat on your computer. Now, if you think about things like ERP and CRM, they never resided on your computer to begin with. They resided somewhere else within your company. And it could have been local, or it could have been somewhere else in the country altogether. It could have been somewhere else in the world. And so from there, the leap to deliveries of a piece of software from somebody else's company is pretty straightforward. And the economics are compelling because now you're sharing that piece of software across a lot of different clients. And many companies, if you're not a Google, if you're not a Microsoft, if you're not kind of one of the leading edge companies like Walmart or Amazon or whoever you at the top edge, it's very difficult for you to hire the talented IT people that you need to manage this complex infrastructure. It's far better for companies to focus on what it is they do with the information that flows from these systems than the actual systems management piece. And so I think that's what you're witnessing. I heard a presentation by Steve Ballmer and others at Microsoft, and they use the expression "they're all in." And for them, it's a migration because they are used to a different delivery model. But for companies like Google and Amazon, Google in particular, because they've always been in the software business, this is a very straightforward leap. For Amazon, that was not in the software business or the hardware business, for that matter. They still kind of had the infrastructure that they are now leveraging. So I think the delivery, the economics of the delivery model are very compelling.
So that's a very, very interesting synopsis of the business case. And so, what kinds of pricing models have you seen for cloud computing, and how are the pricing models structured in a way to be a win-win for the customer and the service provider? For example, from the company side, can they effectively control their cost of the service by controlling their consumption? How well has that really worked out in practice? And from the vendor side, obviously, if they have one application to maintain that they're using to serve several clients, the cost of maintaining that application is quite cheap because you're earning more revenue relative to the cost of that application. But how have they been pricing these models so that they still find it profitable to conduct business in that way?
So the pricing models, I think, are fundamentally on a per unit basis, on a per transaction basis. And of course, what matters to the end customer is how much they pay for a given service over a given time period based on the number of employees that they have. So if you're paying for payroll, you're basically paying for per paycheck that's printed, or I shouldn't even say printed, delivered. If you're buying hardware services from Amazon, they're typically priced per megabyte, per MIP, or whatever. So and there's two ways you typically kind of think about this. One is kind of what is the unit price. Two, actually three, what is the overall volume that you're consuming? And that's another way to manage kind of your overall cost, which is kind of you limit the overall volume if that's possible. But the thing that I hear companies tell me the most is predictability. So they would rather know at some level that when each time I hire a new employee, this is what it's going to cost me to set him or her up in my organization with all the IT infrastructure they need. At some level, they almost prefer that, even if it may cost them a little more. And it actually doesn't cost them more in many cases because the economies of scale that these service providers have is very, very significant. But it is worth spending one more minute thinking about the pricing model, because even from the vendor perspective, this is a very large fixed cost that they incur, and their challenge is figuring out how to bring in enough revenue to compensate for their fixed cost. They don't incur the cost on a variable cost basis. They incur the cost for the most part on a fixed cost basis. So they've already it's a build it will they come model, right? So you've spent tens of millions of dollars building an infrastructure, building an application, and you want to make sure that you have sufficient revenues for that. Exactly. So the question is, what's the right price that allows you to kind of make a reasonable profit when you have a high fixed cost of launching your product or service?
So when we talk about savings, as you did in earlier in this segment, what are the typical savings that an enterprise can realize from moving to a cloud-based solution in the IT world?
So the answer varies, I think, from company to company, and I think, if at the smaller companies the savings are quite significant. And again, so much depends on kind of what you include in the cost, and so I'm a little bit hesitant to kind of come up with the number, but anywhere from 10 to 50%, I think. And I know that's somewhat of a wide range. The bigger companies are going to see kind of less savings. Smaller companies are going to see more significant savings. But I think the more and at the very least, and this is one of the things that I often hear as well, these publicly posted prices that the big service providers are now listing create a very useful benchmark for companies that know the price that they have to beat to continue to offer a service viably. And so I think that's a very useful kind of spillover benefit that we've received from kind of this public provision of infrastructure as a service in particular. So it does give you a very useful cost benchmark, because if you can't do it for that price, you should be considering kind of outsourcing to these kinds of providers very, very seriously if you're not close to it. And like I said, I think, technology management is extremely complex, and unless you have really good people who are able to do it competently, you ought to be thinking about this solution pretty seriously. But I think there are enough cost savings directly that the strategic benefits are nice, are an add-on to your kind of bottom line savings, if you will.
We have less than a minute left. But one area of cloud computing that made a big splash in the marketplace was in the area of utility computing, on-demand services, particularly data center with Amazon's cloud service. How are data center services being impacted by cloud offerings?
I think in the long run, you're going to see a very limited number of services being delivered by internal data centers. I think you're going to see more and more stuff migrate to cloud-based offerings because, again, except for the very largest companies, the economies of scale are clearly in favor of the external service providers. Actually, there's a very interesting question. I know Avasant spends a lot of time in the outsourcing space. There's a very interesting set of questions about what service providers actually do as the cloud begins to compete with them.
Well, maybe we'll use that in another segment. Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you, everybody, for listening to GlobeTalk with Avasant.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed Globe Talk with